A few years ago I was at a friend's house and I met this guy and we got talking, as you do, and he asked me what I did. So I said I was a painter, photographer, graphic designer. And he said, "Oh yeah, I'm a painter too in my spare time. I love it. I learned to paint from Bob Ross. He's fantastic." And I asked who was Bob Ross. I'd never heard of him. And the guy was incredulous. "What, you've never heard of Bob Ross? He was on TV. He's a great artist." So I was a bit baffled by this, so as soon as I got home, I googled Bob Ross. Thus it was that whatever remained of my innocence was brutally stripped away on that day, the day I learnt of the existence of Bob Ross. So I warn you now that if you are of a nervous disposition, what is once seen cannot be unseen. But for those intrepid enough, interested enough, masochistic enough to follow me, let us begin. Bob Ross was a TV personality and painter of sorts who became very famous for his show The Joy of Painting, which ran from 1983 to 1994, mainly in the United States. I certainly don't remember it being broadcast in the UK, but the show can still be watched, if you insist, here on YouTube. This does have relevance to photography, by the way, and I'll be addressing photographers directly later on, so please bear with me. If you are sick, you go to a doctor. If your car breaks down, you go to a mechanic. If your washing machine stops working, you call in a plumber. We recognize some people have specialist knowledge. People who have studied for many years or who have been working in a particular field for many years probably know things that we do not. We're not stupid, but we recognize we are ignorant. We can't know everything about everything, and that is why there are different professions and trades, each to their own, and we happily accept this general state of affairs. But we do not accept it with visual art, or at least we are much more reluctant to accept it, which is the reason why, even now, an artist like Picasso, for example, is universally accepted by the art world as a towering genius, is still a figure of contempt for most lay people, the public at large. Show people a typical Picasso painting and they will scoff and sneer and say, "Oh, that's ridiculous, my child could do better than that." And even if an art professional or a painter of long standing will say to them, "No, believe me, he was a great painter who tackled the nature of humanity and perception and was a brilliant manipulator of paint," the public still won't believe it. And they'll scoff even louder, "No, that's rubbish, you're being pretentious. I can see as well as you, the emperor has got no clothes." The expertise of the art professional, the artist, seems to count for nothing. Imagine saying that to your doctor. Imagine saying, "No, that's not right, I haven't got a broken arm. You don't know what you're talking about." It's unbelievable. Hence, we have the phenomenon of Bob Ross. Now, of course, when one is growing up or taking one's first steps into a particular field of interest, one usually needs an easy entry. I don't think anybody can understand a philosophical work by Wittgenstein without a lot of prep. But the same is true in art. When I was growing up in the late 60s, early 70s, in the UK we had such TV figures as Tony Hart, Rolf Harris, and Nancy Kaminsky, who I remember as a terrifying woman. When teaching us to paint a face, she would scowl and say, "Don't go for a likeness, think yourself lucky if it looks human." These people and their art programs were very important to me growing up, and who knows, without them I may never have become an artist. Perhaps I can blame them for my life of penniless misery. The danger arises if we do not progress from that initial stage and move on and realise that however important Tony and Bob and Rolf and Nancy were to us, that they are not exactly at the top of their professions, or rather that their professions were as TV personalities rather than serious creative artists. Let me show you a comparison. If you Google Bob Ross painting, you will see this. They may not all be by Bob Ross himself. Some of them might be by his friends or helpers or students, but I think you get the general idea. They're all pretty representative. Now, if you are to Google landscape photography, you will see this. There's an uncanny similarity, isn't there? It's as if Walt Disney has taken control of Google. What's going on here? What can explain this apparent infantilization of our vision so that we are fatally attracted to sugary orange skies, frothy mint green seas, and candy-coloured mountains? Let me show you some of my favourite things. I have never heard of anybody admitting that they have bad taste. But taste needs to be developed and nurtured. Children tend not to like tea or coffee or broccoli or strong cheeses. I can remember the first time I had a glass of wine, and I can remember my first sip of malt whiskey. I found them absolutely disgusting. However, I bravely fought through the disgust, and I've now become rather partial to both of them. We are not born with good taste. We need to educate ourselves, develop our senses, and often knowledge informs our taste and can change it. Knowledge and experience are key taste transformers. It is often said art is subjective, and how many times have we heard beauty is in the eye of the beholder? But I don't agree with that. There does exist criteria. There are standards that have survived thousands of years of human experience. Of course, some people find beauty where others see only ugliness. That's perfectly true. Everybody is entitled to their own opinion, of course. But it does not mean everybody is equally right. Some opinions are worth more than others. Knowledge, experience, informed judgment does matter. If we go back to those Toy Town landscape photographs, actually many of the photographs here are perfectly fine. Some of them are excellent, but most have been ruined, annihilated by bad taste in post-processing. The saturation, vibrancy, contrast have all been pushed to their absolute maximum. It's not a technical issue, it's not a problem of cameras or technique or lenses, it is an aesthetic problem. Being at art school is not really about learning how to draw or paint, it's more a question of learning to differentiate between what is good and what is bad, and that is a lifelong process really of refinement and nurture. Technique is largely just a question of ambition, knowledge, hard work and self-criticism. Reading and writing and arithmetic are taught in high schools and secondary schools, but we don't teach visual literacy. Indeed, many people would claim that there is no such thing like climate change. It doesn't exist. But yes, visual literacy does exist. It is understanding the difference between this and this, and between this and this. You might argue that it's also a question of skill, and there's no question that Corot was an infinitely more skillful painter than Bob Ross, but skill comes with ambition, at least to a certain extent. Somebody who wants to paint like Corot will at least stand a better chance of attaining excellence than somebody who is content to paint like Ross. And in order to paint like Corot, or to take photographs to rival Lee Friedlander or Stephen Shaw, one needs to know about them, and appreciate them, and to understand their achievement. Understanding others' work helps you to understand your own work and what you want, and crucially, what you don't want. If you want this, and you don't want this, believe me, that is a very good start. I have my own personal example. I'm not as knowledgeable about contemporary photographers as I am with painting, and I only comparatively recently discovered the work of Anthony Hernandez, Thomas Joshua Cooper, and John Gossage. And just being familiar with their work, I feel, makes me a better photographer. I feel more informed, more competent, better prepared, and knowing their work, as I now do, gives me a wider context and a more profound realization of what I want, what I'm aiming for, and what is possible. In order to improve, we need knowledge. We need context, we need paradigms, benchmarks. We need standards, in a word. Standards set not by social media stars on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram, and certainly not by TV personalities. We need to look to the masters. We need to visit museums and galleries, study the monographs, do our research, put in the work, and always be open to learning and be open to change. If you pick up a brush, you put yourself in competition, in a way, with Velázquez, with Rembrandt, with Picasso. If you pick up a camera, you are in direct dialogue, let's say, with Walker Evans, with Diane Arbus, with Jeff Wall. What do you have to say to them? What can you show them? The masters are always on your shoulder. Take notice, be inspired, fear them, use them.